Jeff, did you really graduate with all of those English degrees?
Dee, are you really a true crime fan and podcaster?
No chance you ran all of those marathons.
I don't even think you're really Irish.
We're doing a full recap of Authentic, the story of Tablo, on this episode of So Much Crime,
So Little Time. Hey, Dee, so I was spending a lot of my afternoon today on some Korean message boards, just stirring stuff up about hip-hop stars and K-pop stars, just, making stuff up.
That must have been exhausting. Did you take any breaks?
Actually, I kind of had a moment where I thought, this isn't a good use of my time, and I don't really want to be here doing this. And so instead, I went to patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time. I just randomly typed that into the URL. Like, I don't know, it just came to me out of nowhere. And when I got there, I saw all of this great bonus content for our show. I saw outtakes, I saw longer time machines, and I got this great feeling, unlike the bad feeling I got on those Korean message boards where I was talking just all kinds of nonsense about Korean hip-hop stars. I was supporting a podcast that I really loved. So patreon.com/so-much-crime, so little time.
Talking shit bad, supporting us on Patreon good. Okay, welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
And I'm Jeff. And before we start, a quick warning.
Warning.
This episode will have spoilers for Authentic, the story of Tablo. We're going to discuss the whole series.
If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on the show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
And you can also find a link for Tablo in our show notes. Before we get to our discussion, let's just do a quick recap of what this podcast is about. So this podcast came out in 2022. The host is Dexter Thomas Jr. There are 8 episodes, plus a couple of bonus episodes. The length is really debatable. I think it's about 30 to 40 minutes each, although I don't know about you, Dee, but the version I listened to had
ads.
A lot of ads, like a solid...
So long.
I think each episode ended with about 6 to 10 minutes left of just ads. Anyway, but what happened in the first episode that we talked about in our preview?
Okay, so we heard a little bit about the major Korean hip-hop star Tablo basically getting hounded by rumors that he was a fraud. The rumors were that he didn't really go to Stanford. The rumors seemed quite basic and banal, like, oh, he didn't go to Stanford. But then some wacky rumors came out, like he had ties to the Illuminati, he had connections to the Korean and US presidents. In general, basically, the vibe was he couldn't be trusted. Then we heard about his childhood. He was born in Korea and then he moved to Canada. His parents pressured him and his siblings to go to top schools. He ended up at Stanford, then broke into the hip hop scene, which really didn't exist before Tablo and the gang at Epic High got involved. So, Jeff, other than the ads, which we've already discussed, tell me, where would you like to begin?
I'd actually like to begin somewhere sort of outside of the podcast.
Oh, okay.
I spent my time tonight before we started recording listening to the music of Epic High and Tablo. Did you listen outside of the clips they played in the series? Did you listen to any of it?
No. Was I supposed to? I did listen to the bonus episode, or most of the bonus episode, about the music. Did you listen to that one?
Yeah, I did. And that kind of prompted me to listen to it because they talked about their influences and how Tablo's influences include Snoop Dogg and
Bob
Black
Dylan.
Star and Nirvana, some like 90s.
Was Bob Dylan one of them?
I don't remember that, maybe. But yeah, I just thought like it sounded like he was describing their sound, or he's describing Korean hip hop as sort of being like, I don't know, 10 to 20 years behind the US, but heavily obviously influenced by US hip hop. And that, I don't know, kind of piqued my interest. And they talked about like Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul. And it's definitely reminiscent of that. So, yeah, I kind of liked it. I thought it was really good.
You thought the music was really good, not necessarily the podcast. Is that what's happening here?
I just want to start there because I feel like this is a podcast about a musician. And so I thought we should take a second at the top and just acknowledge.
Sure.
Because I actually had a note. Yeah, I was listening to this podcast and the clips they played in the show. Some of them I thought like, are we spending all this time on this guy and his music actually isn't very good? So I thought I should go and do a little bit of research. And
Does it matter though? Did that matter?
Does any of this matter? Who cares if he went to Stanford?
Oh yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's what I think. Like we got from like some of the wilder accusations about like the Illuminati and the connections to presidents and stuff. But I think it was an episode Hell Korea. In that episode, yes, it doesn't matter to us, but it does matter to him. It does matter to the nation. It does matter to the fans. And as an artist, what matters to the fans has to matter to you if you want to be successful.
Yeah.
So I found that really fascinating, because I think at that stage in the series, I was a little bit like, this is a whole lot of nothing. Not the podcast itself, but as in like, why does anyone care? It's not as if he's a doctor claiming to be able to like perform open heart surgery and he's actually, not qualified. That
Right.
I'd care about. But and I'm sure there's a podcast on that somewhere. But that's not here. But the thing is, it does matter in Korea, and we heard that about the artist Shin Jung-ah, yeah. And so it does matter. It's not a whole lot of nothing.
It's not a whole lot of nothing. I actually thought it was kind of an interesting, to me, surprising pivot about both why this is so important in Korean culture, but also then where the crime comes in. So like we heard that in episode 5, I think, which was called Consequences, where, yeah, like people went to jail over this. Like people were actually punished over this. And I think that like defamation, like so they were essentially defaming Tablo. And I remember we were talking about in our preview how like, what is the crime here? Is there an actual crime here? And yeah, I wasn't expecting this to be the crime. That wasn't at all what I thought. And like, I think it was 9 people got convicted, and 3 of them got 8 to 10 months in prison. And the one who was kind of the biggest one, the one who went by the username What Becomes, would have probably gotten more severe punishment. The people who basically were posing threats to his family, but like he was in the US and they couldn't extradite him. So yeah, this definitely took some turns that I was not expecting, which, yeah, it was pretty fascinating.
Yeah, and that was another aspect. I felt like they were really trying to tell a balanced story, and they were trying to get What Becomes on the podcast. Really went to extreme efforts, it felt like, to track him down, which was a bonkers pivot.
Yeah.
When you're in this home for like, not elderly people, like not like a nursing home, but like sort of for people whose kids don't want them, but they're from low income families. It was a weird pivot.
Yeah, that was a sort of a dark moment in this, but also like,
and even the layers of like, oh, you're a black woman just wandering around this building, and Dexter was like, whoa, like, be careful, you've got a mask on and you're just wandering around, like, you never know what could happen, kind of thing. Like, that's not safe. Like, even these like little layers, they didn't like dwell on it, but I was like, whoa, there is a lot happening here. People just throwing their family members in this place. And then I appreciated the effort, but I felt like there was a lot of detail in that episode that I was like, this just feels very important, but maybe not related to the podcast itself. Do you know what I mean?
It wasn't, and it was. I think what I liked about that, because a note I'd had earlier that I took down was I felt like we were here, and we actually talked about this in the preview, I think, and then I was thinking this as I was listening to the first few episodes of, we're hearing a lot from Tablo about his story, and I really wanted to hear kind of the other side, and I wanted to hear a more balanced version of this. And so I appreciated that they showed what extreme lengths they went to try to get that, even if that particular case didn't really work out. But then they did get another person who had posted on those boards to talk. And I don't know, I think it seems like there's no doubt that all of this was made up, and Tablo, went to Stanford, did what he said he did, but that yet there were actual crimes here. And I don't know, like we were talking about some of these pivots. The other pivot that I want to talk about is Sam Cho, his cousin, who seemed to be behind a little bit of this and sort of playing into the
Yeah,
whole
but
thing?
I feel like we heard like a little bit from Tablo on that, and then we hear a little bit from Sam Cho on it, and then like it's a real, three sides to every story because they both have like pretty different views or memories of their relationship, how much time they spent together, and what happened just before this whole scandal or whatever you might call it broke.
Yeah.
So I feel like we could have dug in a little bit more to figure out what is that, like what is that third story, like what is the middle
Yes.
story, what is the story that actually happened there.
But one of the things that Sam said that stuck out to me, I don't know if this stuck out to you, but as an English major, he
was not very kind to the creative writing people.
Yeah, basically saying like this was sort of like a way to have easy good grades, was taking these creative writing classes. And like, first of all, that's not wrong. Got a lot of A's in my creative writing classes. But also, who fucking cares? You're at Stanford.
Yeah, but he's been brought up to care. You can't dismiss that how you're brought up, no matter how you try and fight against it. There are elements of how you're brought up and what is instilled in you for the first 20 years of your life, or maybe
Sure.
more, is going to sit there. And you might have to try harder to ignore it and try to overcome it, but it will always kind of sit there.
And I appreciate that this podcast talked about sort of like where that idea comes from in Korea. Kind of got into a little bit of the history of Korea and the education system and sort of the pressure.
That was pretty
on these
fascinating.
Kids. Yeah. Did you know any of that before?
No. I'd say the most I knew about Korea, or I would know about Korea or North Korea or South Korea, is genuinely from the other podcasts we've done that have touched on it. So the sinking of the Pongsu. And then was there another one that we spoke about Korea? No, it's just Pongsu. Yeah, I feel like so to me it was actually really interesting to hear all this. I think that part of me like has that down as one of the reasons that I liked this podcast. There was a lot of things that I was interested in. It was quite a different crime and quite a different perspective on the crime, given Dexter's interest in music and Tablo's interest in music. So that was like another layered element that made it quite nice. It helped that Dexter's voice is just so smooth and easy to listen to also.
Yeah.
So I felt like all that was really good. I do have a couple of other things that I want to talk to you about. First of all, in the last episode, it felt to me like there was this smooth voice, random pivot to QAnon and January 6th. And I was like, whoa, this is sharp. Like, I get it. I'm not saying that the connection isn't there, but it felt like a real sharp turn here. I was wondering, did that feel relevant to you at the time? Did it feel like it stuck out as like, whoa?
It stuck out. I think in the podcast, it was a little bit abrupt, but it felt natural to me because I'd actually written in my notes earlier, and I don't remember what episode I wrote this down in, but there was a parallel in what they were saying about like, show us your transcript or show us your diploma. I forget what document from Stanford.
This like
the
Barack
birther
Obama
thing. Yeah. And that was later. Like this actually predates that because this was in 2010 and the birther thing was in 2014-ish. I don't remember what year that was. It was second term Obama. And that internet culture and that sort of like, we don't believe anything even when we see the real documents, and just like, we're just going to believe what we believe because that's just how it is. Like that, I feel like this podcast is like, that's the crime here, and that's sort of the cultural movement that it represents. And I kind of appreciate that they didn't dwell more on that. Like I don't know, we're just so inundated by that now.
Well, that's the other thing that I found interesting. At one point, I haven't got this written down, but I remember wanting to note it. So they were discussing how once the police got involved, Dexter was drawing a comparison to whatever situation was happening with the police, that it was similar to the president calling the FBI and asking the FBI to start to investigate someone, and then the president constantly calling to ask for updates on it. And there was literally a sentence saying that wouldn't happen in America.
Yeah, that's why this is 2 years old.
And I was like, whoa, how this podcast has aged, and Jesus, how backwards it is that's like this is where it's aged.
That's
Like it's not aged. It's just really stuck out as a part in time. You know, the pre shit show of 2025.
And I actually kind of wondered about that because that stuff was happening in the 2016 to 2020 time. It's just much more significant now in 2025.
It's got a much more traction, and that's the parallel that I actually think Dexter would probably draw on now, is like the traction that this stuff brought. And that was one of the discussions about this whole thing, was it got up to 200,000 followers in quite a small country. Can't remember the population of Korea or South Korea, but you know, something that starts and we're saying like, who cares? And we're
52
saying
million.
okay,
It's actually a lot of people.
It is a lot of people. But you know, the traction that it builds up, and I think that's actually the comparison, is the traction of all of these. I don't want to lean into politics too much here, Jeff, but like all of these things that are coming out right now, and figuring out who's on your side for these extreme measures that are being put in place, whether you're on the left or on the right. You know, let's just suss it out. And I think that's actually more related to this story now than this sharp pivot to QAnon and all that. To me, that feels like it.
What I guess I liked about this in that way, on this point, is that we know that this kind of thing of sort of the internet mob and, you know, doxing people and, you know, sort of cyberbullying or whatever you want to call it, is just sort of the new normal. Like it's just happening all over. It's you know, in 2010 this was maybe a relatively new thing, and now it's everywhere. But what I appreciated here was we got to hear how an incidence of this got arguably carried away and had real consequences for both the person at the center of it and some of the people behind it. And yeah, so there were consequences on both sides here. And I mean, that parallel that Tablo draws to, like this, basically he feels like killed his dad. Like his dad got sick and died, possibly as a indirect result or maybe direct result of the stress on the family and the threats to the family and the sort of hate swirling around them. And so it made something that is like an abstract concept that is around all of us right now very tangible and human and real and relatable. Because I think like I felt, I really kind of felt like I understood how stressful this was for him, and as well as with his daughter, and just like, you know, he posts a picture or whatever when his daughter is born, and the haters come out, like he's a new dad, and like just the cruelty of it.
And to me, the comparison that I would have drawn was to Meghan Markle and how much she was absolutely crucified so often for everything, for not smiling enough, for not giving the public enough, for being too much into the public, for being too stiff, for following etiquettes when it didn't suit her, for not following them enough. Like there was no winning there. Like she just could not win. And it felt like that was the situation. Like he would show his transcripts from Stanford and people would be like, well, they're probably not right. Or did he just attend and he didn't graduate? Like all this crap. It just felt like it was never ending and nothing he could do could win the people over. I thought it was an interesting take on the crime. But I do also wonder, do you think a lot of people view this as a crime?
What the people did to him?
Mm-hmm. Like, I don't mean like, look, yes, it went to court and blah, blah, blah. I mean, like, in general, when we talk about Meghan Markle, when we talk about Tablo, when we talk about insert whoever here, is there a crime?
Well, and actually,
when it's a celebrity,
I appreciate that in Korea, they treat this as a crime, defamation as a serious crime, because in America, it's not really. And I think, to your point, with celebrities, you especially feel like you can get away with it, and the sort of presumed anonymity of posting on the internet, which, first of all,
and also the lack of empathy for celebrities, because sure, they're rich. Yeah. Who gives a shit, basically?
You know that trend, and I'm going to sound like an old person here.
I mean, it's okay. You are. You always sound old.
But you know that thing, and I forget what it's called. That thing where it's called swatting. You familiar with swatting?
Like flies?
No. Swatting is when you basically call in a SWAT team on somebody as a prank. Like you say there's like a I don't know, a hostage situation or something at somebody's house, and they're just sitting there watching TV or playing video games, and a SWAT team shows up and breaks down their door and scares the shit out of them. That's a thing that's happening right now in our society. And aside from the obvious like waste of resources, and like there's a whole lot of reasons why this is a terrible thing that's happening, but just sort of the idea that like this is funny and like this is a thing, like, and again, to sound like an old person, like, yeah, there've been pranks that we played on people for forever, but that's like a whole nother level. Like you're involving a bunch of people and big guns and scary, like, I don't know. It's so much, like, I think that's what I kind of took away from this. And your point about like this government thing would never happen now, like, and yeah, it would happen in 2025. This is increasing sort of exponentially, and I feel like it's spiraling out of control. And I don't know, it's like I was going to ask you, like, how do you feel as the parent of younger children than mine? How do you protect them from things like this? Like, how do you teach them?
You don't think about it just yet. You just hope that stuff figures it out by then. But I also think like we are in a different situation. Like one of the big things that I got from this was like the intense pressure that they were feeling, and like that feeling of inequality and how that breeds anger and frustration.
Yeah.
And the outlets for this were these forums. You would hope that if you don't raise your kids in a situation, and this I know this is like naive and whatever, but if you raise your kids not to feel intense pressure and not to feel an inequality because someone has more than you or someone's getting stuff easier than you would hope that would take away some of that maybe anger and frustration that you might feel. But I mean, we can't protect them against everything, and that is just life, and it's terrifying, and especially terrifying, I think, for me. Not that it's not terrifying for you with teenagers, but for me, when I'm so used to having so much control over their lives.
Yeah.
The idea of just allowing them out there to the big bad world is terrifying.
Yeah, I got bad news for you. That amount of control is just going to get less and less as they get older and older.
I know. Come here, I have a couple of other things to say, and I think that's the second time I've said this. Another question that I feel like I shouldn't ask. I am surprised that Dexter didn't ask, or maybe that he asked and decided to cut it and maybe said that, even speaking it might create something not great for Tablo. One thing that kept coming to mind, and it was mentioned a couple of times, but like they didn't dwell on it much. The other members of Epic High, Tukuts and Mitra, I think are their names. Sorry if I butchered them. Were in the army at the time of this whole thing starting. So Epic High weren't actually producing anything. Now, in the preview, I posed the question before knowing a lot more about this, like whether Tablo could have been involved in starting some of this, because, all publicity is good publicity. I kind of don't, that's not my vibe anymore, having listened to it all.
Yeah.
But I do think the question of if the scandal helped keep the band relevant at the time when two of its members were gone for 2 years, and also has it become a factor in their continued success, or maybe, oh, that's that band that had that big scandal, like let's get them on here or whatever. Has that actually helped the band in some way? I know this is an awkward question because I heard the pain. I heard everything he went through with his family and how it has impacted how they speak to each other and stuff. And it's obviously his father and the stress his father was under. But it felt like an important and relevant question to ask. An awkward one.
Yeah.
But an important and relevant one.
I think that's a good question. I definitely, as I was listening to this, was sort of wondering about the, I don't want to say like journalistic integrity of Dexter, but like he does seem to be hip hop fan first, journalist second. I did wonder if someone who was maybe less of a fan, maybe more of an outsider, would have treated this story differently, because, and this came up in the bonus episode, the first bonus episode about the music, where Dexter sort of seems unapologetically just like, in it for the hip hop. And like I think that helped the story. I think that helped inform the storytelling and the sort of the knowledge of the music scene. But maybe I'm misreading him, and maybe that's unfair criticism. But it did kind of come across to me like Tablo got sort of the softball treatment throughout this.
Yeah.
So I don't think you're wrong.
I agree. I feel like there were some awkward questions that could have been asked there. I would love to, spend a little bit of time talking about some Reddit reviews that I found, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Random aside, Jeff. I happened to spot a Reddit review on a true crime podcast forum, and it was about this podcast. But in finding that, I found something that is not about this podcast, and it really stood out, and I had to bring it to you. The review read, "I got bored of all the murder and have moved on to scammers." And I just was taken aback, and maybe I was like, oh my God, is this your gateway, and then you're going to go scammers? Like, what's next for you? And then it made me think of my fascination with true crime stories, true crime podcasts. And it really made me question myself, I have to say, because that's a wild statement.
Why? Let's dissect that a little bit. As your therapist, I'm curious to hear more. How, do you feel like you need the crimes to be more and more violent as you go, as opposed to this person who seems to be shifting away from the violence? Maybe they have a little bit healthier of an outlook on life.
But they're like, even saying I got bored of all the murder, that's not okay. You can't say that.
Are you now thinking about committing murders because you...
No.
Okay.
To fuck off. Anyway, I just thought it was a sentence that I was like, I don't think anyone should have thought that. I don't think anyone should have posted that. But anyway.
It's curious how it hit such a nerve that you felt the need to bring it up here.
I know. I'm aware. I will dissect, and we can come back on next week's therapy session. Okay. So, interestingly, a lot of the reviews for this podcast, not shockingly, I suppose, were on a K-pop thread in Reddit, not necessarily a true crime podcast. Although I did notice that it was mentioned in a lot of like, what should I listen to next podcasts as being like really good, very well done, really intriguing, addictive, like all these kind of words were used for it. So that was interesting. And then a lot of reviews or mentions were from the K-pop thread. I'm just going to read a few to you now.
Okay.
Because it felt like I was seeing this story in a different light. Because maybe if I'd known Tablo and I could see this playing out, maybe this podcast would have been more of it would have maybe hit harder. I don't know. OMG, that will be a hard listen. That will be hard to listen to, but important too. It's like, okay.
Wait, it'll be hard to listen to this podcast?
Yeah, this story and hearing about it, like going to a deep dive of the story, is going to be hard to listen to, but it's important too.
What do you think the context for that is?
This person obviously knows the hardship that Tablo had felt, maybe had listened to a documentary, maybe had followed the story throughout, and is like, oh my God, that's going to be incredibly hard to listen to. And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe my basis for hard to listen to is skewed because of the amount of true crime podcasts I listen to, but I didn't find it hard to listen to. Another one, finally a deep dive into Taijin Yo, or whatever the thing's called. Wow, Tablo went through so much. Tablo deserves a 10-episode series after everything he went through.
Wait, 8 episodes wasn't enough?
Yes, apparently not. Well, we did have 2 bonus. So.
Yeah, there were 10
I
episodes.
remember this happening, and it was batshit insane. And then someone responding to someone basically being like, like he didn't go through that much. I'm paraphrasing. They obviously didn't use such an Irish phrase there, and they responded saying he was so paranoid about who even at the hospital was against him, he had to consider whether the doctor had bad intentions when vaccinating himself and his child. And that is a point we haven't discussed yet. But whoa, I had to re-listen to that because I was like, whoa, that, like, to question that, to be that level of paranoid, but also feeling like I can't let you put a needle in my arm and my daughter's arm.
Which, again, I feel like we're moving in a direction of sort of increased paranoia and mistrust of people, of like, oh, like that person's wearing a red hat or that person drives a Cybertruck. They represent this. Yeah, like that. I feel like these were the early days, the 2010 or so. And it seems like so quaint in a way.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. Anyway, would you recommend this to a friend?
There is a couple of friends that I know that would be interested in K-pop or music in general. Like, I know this isn't K-pop, it's like hip-hop, but I feel like this could fit, and also interested in true crime. And I'd be interested to hear their take on it because they have that, you know, both of those interests. Mine was true crime. Didn't really have an interest in the music side of things here. So I'd be interested to recommend it to them and hear their thoughts on it. Would I recommend it to my normal go-to, I need to recommend a good podcast to these true crime fans? No, personally. Not that it wasn't done well, not that I didn't enjoy Dexter's smooth voice, not that I didn't think it was put together well and that the story wasn't intriguing, but for the type of people I usually recommend true crime podcasts to, I wouldn't recommend this to.
Interesting. Okay.
I got bored of the music.
I did appreciate in that bonus episode where they actually talked about the theme song of the podcast and sort of broke that down. And
I mean, but then to me, that was like, obviously to you, like, because you like music and shit, but like to me, it was like, oh, and then the drums and the layering and the plan. I'm like, I don't give a shit. Is the drumstick flying across the room and hitting someone in the head or like gouging out an eye? That's a bit much. But like, that's the shit I want to hear about. I don't care about the layering of the music because it's just not my vibe. Would you? Are you going to recommend this to people? I feel like there's going to be people in your life that you'd recommend this to, but it's nothing to do with crime.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting story. I think I learned a lot about Korea.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
I think I learned about Korean culture.
I like learning. I
also
work for learning. I like learning. Sorry.
Is that how I sound? Is that your impression of me?
No, that's just the
Am I Kermit the Frog?
I don't want to actually do an imitation of your voice. I think that would be more insulting.
Wow. More insulting than your Kermit the Frog voice. Great.
That was a good. I'm glad you figured out who I was trying to be there.
I would recommend this. I thought it was well made. I thought it went in some unexpected directions, and I don't know. I liked it. There's no murder, but there is crime, and yeah, we've never covered a story anything like this. This is completely different, so I appreciate it for that.
If you liked hearing our show today, please leave us a comment on Instagram, Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tell us how you felt. Rate us. Don't forget, 5 stars is the best number of stars that we could receive. And tell a friend, tell your family, frenemies, co-workers, postman, anyone really.
All right, Dee, what's up next?
Next up, we are going to discuss a group who calls itself a humanitarian community, but experts call it a cult. We are going to cover Escaping Nexium from CBC Podcasts and CBC News. That's on the next So Much Crime,
So Little Time. So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.